New Year's Eve. A day when everything around seems to come alive with anticipation, filled with the excitement of the holiday and twinkling lights. The entire city was glowing with decorations, store windows were adorned with Christmas ornaments, and the air carried the crisp chill of winter mixed with the sweet scent of cinnamon. Alexa stood by the window of her office, watching the bustling streets below. She couldn't help but notice the joy on people's faces, some holding hands as they hurried toward buses heading home to their families. Yet, she didn't share their excitement or feel the festive spirit. Instead, Alexa felt like the exception to the rule, the one person for whom New Year's Eve didn't hold any special meaning. She glanced at her colleagues, who were leaving the office with laughter and cheerful goodbyes. Some were rushing to family dinners, others had plans with friends, and Karen from accounting had picked up her dog from the vet before heading to her husband's cabin in the countryside. Alexa sighed involuntarily. Everyone had left, and she remained. December 31st was never a day she spent in the company of loved ones or friends. No, she had no family traditions, only work. The only reminder that the holiday was even happening was a small box of champagne and a bag of mandarins, a token gift from her boss to all employees before he left for the day. Champagne and mandarins, she thought with a wry smile. So this is my New Year's celebration. She wasn't exactly sad, just exhausted. All summer and fall, Alexa had buried herself in work, handling financial reports without ever feeling the need to take a break. She was used to working alone, surrounded by paperwork, but now, standing in an empty office and glancing at the clock, she realized that a quiet emptiness had settled inside her. Time was passing, yet she didn't feel like going home. Home doesn't sound appealing, she thought, lowering her gaze to the report she needed to finish. Despite the festive atmosphere outside, her life remained unchanged. December 31st was a short work day, as usual, but that was exactly what she liked. Short days, brief chats with colleagues, a few scattered projects, and then, voila, New Year's Eve. A day she never quite knew how to celebrate. Her boss wasn't a sentimental man, but he had a habit of small gestures like champagne and mandarins. He had gone around the office, smiling as he handed out the gifts, reminding everyone, "Folks, New Year's is a time to rest and be with the people we love. Alexa, didn't you say you were spending it with family?" His words were warm, but Alexa couldn't bring herself to respond, only nodding instead. The truth was, she had no family to spend the evening with. Her mother had moved to another city long ago, and the rest of her relatives had never been particularly eager to stay in touch. It was becoming painfully clear that, like every year before, she would spend this night alone. Suppressing a sigh, Alexa turned back to her work, trying not to think about how the holidays were supposed to be a time of joy and togetherness. But outside, beyond the glass, the world was filled with laughter and anticipation. Her colleagues had all gone home, and she remained in the office, feeling strangely out of place. This night wasn't anything special for her. Suddenly, she noticed the silence in the office, a stark contrast to the usual daytime hum. The workday had ended, and the building was empty. Everyone had left, and she sat in the quiet space, finishing a report without really knowing why. The longer she stayed, the stranger it felt. This New Year's Eve, like all the ones before, didn't belong to her. When the clock read 6:30 p.m., she decided it was time to go. Grabbing the bottle of champagne and the bag of mandarins, she left the office, ignoring the slight pang of loneliness in her chest. Walking carefully on the snow-covered sidewalk, she made her way home. Everything was just as expected. Streets lined with twinkling lights, houses glowing warmly, and the whole world seemingly lost in the holiday spirit. But for her, this evening was nothing more than an ordinary night, with small comforts like champagne and mandarins and nothing more. There was no one waiting for her at home. No family, no friends to call and wish her a happy new year. She couldn't even picture how to spend the evening alone. Once inside, she placed the champagne in the fridge and sat by the window. Outside, a fresh snowfall blanketed the city in white. Watching the peaceful scene, her thoughts felt a little lighter. Maybe I just need some time alone, she mused, but then realized her apartment didn't even carry the slightest hint of holiday cheer. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was her old college friend, Jake. "Hey, Alexa, how are you?" "Wait, Are you already home?" His voice was full of surprise, hearing the quiet tone of his longtime friend. "Yeah, I'm home. Just relaxing, Jake. How about you?" she answered, trying not to sound too lonely. "Wait, you're not going out at all?" he asked, almost offended. "It's New Year's Eve. You can't spend it alone. We're all heading to a bar with some friends. You should come." But Alexa just smiled and said, "I just need some time for myself. Thanks for the invite, but I think I'll stay in. I've got some work to finish up." "You're serious?" Jake sighed but kept his voice warm. "All right, if that's what you want, just know that we're thinking of you, even from a distance." Hanging up the phone, Alexa felt a small pang of restlessness. There was no doubt this New Year's Eve would be spent alone, and maybe that was okay. But still, she wished the night, even in solitude, could feel just a little more special. Alexa spent a few minutes standing in the hallway, staring at her phone, trying to decide what to do. New Year's Eve was getting closer, but she had neither invitations nor company. All she could do was sit in her cozy but empty apartment, soaking in the light coming from the window. The sounds of celebration drifted in from outside, but she didn't feel any joy or a particular reason to join in. Honestly, there was no real reason to even get excited about a big holiday. For a moment, her gaze stopped on a box of champagne and some bags of tangerines she had grabbed at the office. The gesture from her boss had been sweet, but it didn't spark any real sense of happiness in her. Sadness still lingered. How could you celebrate the new year when the entire year had passed in loneliness and meaningless worries? She decided not to wait for a miracle and try to make the evening a little less gloomy. Placing the box of champagne on the table, Alexa walked decisively to the door. Maybe pizza will save the night, she thought. After all, there was no need to spend energy cooking when she could just order a pizza and have a quiet night in. She slowly put on her jacket, hoping the cold air outside would help chase away the strange feeling of solitude. As she stepped outside, Alexa was surprised by how festive everything looked. Huge Christmas trees adorned with thousands of twinkling lights, sparkling store windows. It all looked like a magical scene that, somehow, she had stepped out of. Maybe it was magic, but for some reason, she felt a little detached from it. She pulled out her phone and started calling pizza places, but with each number, her hopes faded. One call after another resulted in nothing. All the lines were busy. Just as she was about to give up and go home, deciding against ordering pizza, she decided to try one more number. And this time, she got lucky. A young man answered, and his voice sounded calm and confident. "Hello, how can I help you?" asked the delivery guy in a pleasant but slightly tired tone. "Hi, I'd like to order a pizza." "Yes, just a regular pizza, with pepperoni, if possible," Alexa replied, a little surprised that someone actually answered. She nodded in satisfaction, gave her address, and ended the call. The pizza would be there in about half an hour, and it lightened her mood a little. But the streets were so full of lights, so full of festive spirit, that Alexa couldn't help herself. Instead of waiting at home for the pizza, she decided to stop by the nearest supermarket. Why not make the evening a little more interesting? After all, there's always something fun to find for a celebration. The supermarket was crowded, with people rushing around, picking up party supplies or ingredients for New Year's dinner. Alexa smiled as she watched them. She wasn't in a hurry, browsing the shelves, picking out cheeses, deli meats, and fruits. She felt a little strange. When everyone around you is busy creating a festive atmosphere and you're standing alone, it makes you think. But she decided she wouldn't waste time being gloomy. At least this evening would be tasty. She put several kinds of cheese, a pineapple, some deli meats, a few bottles of water, and, well, for the full experience, she added a chocolate bar. The feeling that she wasn't just preparing dinner but creating some special moment began to grow. Strangely, something about this peaceful feeling felt like a real gift. At the checkout, Alexa felt that there was room in her life for something small but important. These simple joys. The shopping was paid for, and as she left the supermarket, she felt a little lighter. Whatever the evening turned out to be, it still had meaning. When Alexa returned home and began unpacking her purchases, her phone screen lit up again. It was the pizza delivery guy. "Hello, I'm downstairs. Are you home?" came the voice on the other end. "Oh, yes, Yes, I'm waiting for you, she replied, glancing at the clock in surprise. The pizza was supposed to be here in 10 minutes, but it had already been about half an hour. As she stepped out of her apartment, Alexa suddenly realized that her day wasn't all that boring. Sure, the pizza had come a little late, but she had tangerines, champagne, and the joy that evening hadn't been completely empty. Standing in the doorway of the building, she was greeted by a young man, the pizza delivery guy. He was tall, with short dark hair, wearing a winter jacket, and had a subtle smile. She might have thought he was just one of those guys who do their job and hurry on to the next, but there was something unusual in his eyes, a certain ease and attentiveness. "Good evening," he said, handing her the pizza box. "Here's your pizza as promised." "Thank you." Alexa smiled and, automatically reaching for her money, noticed she was still holding the bottle of champagne. It seemed a little strange, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. "Oh, sorry, I got a little flustered," she said, holding out the bottle of champagne. "Here's a gift for you. I was going to sit down and drink this champagne, but I guess I'll pass it on to you." He looked a little surprised, but there was a flicker of humor in his eyes. "Thanks, but the champagne is really for you," he said, laughing. "I probably can't drink with you, can I?" Alexa couldn't hold back a smile. "Well, you're wrong. We have a chance to drink to this evening," she said with a light laugh. "Let me open the champagne." They went up to her apartment, and when the man took off his coat and sat down next to her on the couch, Alexa realized that the evening wasn't quite how she had imagined. That's how their evening conversation began, full of light laughter and humor. Time passed, and every moment felt magical. When they toasted to the new year, Alexa suddenly realized that spending the evening alone hadn't been in vain, because it was in that moment, sitting with a stranger, that she felt something unexpected. Maybe the real miracle of the New Year's night. The evening, which just a couple of hours ago had seemed completely ordinary to Alexa, had turned into something strange and thrilling. She was sitting on the couch, facing Jason, the delivery guy she had seemingly just met, who, despite his role as a pizza delivery man, had unexpectedly become her companion for this New Year's Eve. A glance at the clock showed that there was very little time left until midnight, and the approaching end of the old year added a light sense of ceremony to the atmosphere. Alexa didn't yet realize that this evening, this unplanned moment which she hadn't anticipated, would change a lot. She sat, bringing her glass of champagne to her lips, thinking that it was a bit strange to invite a stranger to a celebration, but at the same time, everything happening felt completely normal. Maybe it was part of some bigger plan? "So here's to the old year?" Jason suggested, raising his glass. He wasn't too insistent, and his manners seemed to emphasize the ease and casualness of the moment. He was calm, self-assured, with a light expression on his face, as if celebrating New Year's every day with friends and strangers alike. "To the old year," Alexa replied with a smile, and they both, almost casually, made the toast. They drank, and Jason placed his glass on the coffee table. Seconds stretched on, but neither of them felt awkward, as one might expect with a stranger. Alexa noticed that Jason had tried to engage her in conversation a few times, never pushing too hard, but with such sincerity that it caught her attention. In return, she couldn't help but smile. Maybe it was just the influence of the holiday? Or perhaps something more? "Have you ever spent New Year's alone?" Jason suddenly asked, as the pause between them stretched out. Alexa was a little surprised by the question. People usually don't ask such personal questions in such a casual conversation, but his soft, attentive gaze made her more open. Maybe he was just curious? Or maybe he didn't know how to keep the conversation going? "Yeah, I have," Alexa shrugged. "Sometimes life works out in a way that you end up celebrating the holiday alone. But this time, I didn't expect it to turn out quite like this." Jason looked at her with understanding. "I've spent New Year's alone too sometimes," he said. "There are times when you don't have anyone to share those moments with. But sometimes, in those moments, you start seeing the world in a whole new way." Alexa smiled again, but this time her smile was more peaceful than light-hearted. She knew exactly what he was talking about. Sometimes loneliness during the holidays can be really hard, but at the same time, it can become a source of discovering yourself. "You know, you're right," Alexa said. When there's no one around, you start asking yourself questions. It's strange, but sometimes it's in those moments you suddenly realize what it means to be alone. And when you realize that no one expects anything from you, you kind of start to relax. Yeah, sometimes it's those moments that give us freedom, Jason agreed. Freedom to be ourselves, do whatever we want, without thinking about what others will think. That moment made her think. She knew that work, everyday life, all those worries, sometimes drain from us what was once most important, the ability to enjoy the present. With every word he spoke, Alexa felt her heart soften a little. And in his voice, in those simple words, there was something calming that finally allowed her to relax. Soon, their conversations smoothly transitioned to light jokes and funny stories from their lives. Jason told her about the time he accidentally went the wrong way while delivering a pizza and how it led to an unexpected friendship with a cop who tried to catch him for a traffic violation. In return, Alexa told him about a time at a work party when she mixed up the names of two senior managers and ended up in an awkward situation. They laughed, and time flew by unnoticed. At one point, Alexa realized that not only had time passed quickly, but her internal state had changed. In that moment, she understood that she had never been more grateful for fate, leading her to this conversation with this stranger and for the lightness he had brought into her life. "I'm glad I met you tonight," Jason said after another joke, and his voice was serious, but with a smile. Sometimes the most unexpected moments in life end up being the ones we remember. Alexa was a little surprised by these words. What had started so casually, like an ordinary conversation, now had a depth she couldn't explain. Why didn't she want this evening to end? "I'm glad too," she replied. "I didn't think that on this night I'd meet someone I could talk to so easily. Thank you for this moment." The clock on the wall showed that there was less than 15 minutes until midnight. A strange sense of magic started to envelop them both. The new year was almost here, and despite all the coincidences, Alexa suddenly realized that this evening had become something special for her. Deep down, she felt that it wasn't just a coincidence. At some point, she had the feeling that fate had literally brought her to this person. "So, are you ready to celebrate the new year?" Jason asked, looking at her intently, and Alexa noticed how his gaze had become more serious. She paused for a moment and answered, not hiding her smile, "Yeah, I'm ready." And with that answer, they raised their glasses, made another toast, and the new year arrived. When the clock struck midnight, both Jason and Alexa realized that this moment would be unforgettable. First laughter, then a toast, and then the feeling that they had just become part of something bigger than just the evening. Something that defied logic, but was real and strong. That New Year's Eve, despite its unusualness, Alexa felt like a little miracle had happened. And she couldn't say exactly what it was, but one thing was clear. This moment, this evening with Jason, was just the beginning. Alexa stood by the window, watching as the night slowly engulfed the city outside her apartment. The cafe tables on the street, the festive lights, and the smiling faces of people heading home or meeting up with friends added a warm glow to the scene. She had this strange feeling that the whole world was living in some kind of parallel reality. Here it was, the new year, and she was part of something bigger. It was a little bit magical, but despite all the magic, she knew that for her, all the lights and the celebrations were just wrapping paper. Behind it all was that quiet, solitary life she was used to, living on her own terms without expecting much from the outside world. Yet that evening, and this person, Jason, had made her feel like there could be something more. Maybe it was just a New Year's miracle, or maybe her life could actually be brighter? Jason, like her, seemed to not fully realize what was happening. They were both in this strange in-between state, between the past and the future, between loneliness and something new that was just starting to unfold. So far, it felt casual, but it could become something meaningful. This feeling of ambiguity, ease, and the anticipation of something new kept her on edge. "I never thought I'd be celebrating New Year's with a stranger," Jason said, in a good mood, his face glowing in the soft light, and his voice sounded confident, with a playful edge. Alexa, sitting on the couch, tilted her head slightly and smiled. "Yeah, it's kind of strange, but in a way, it gives the evening a certain charm," she replied. I like that we're just sitting here talking. No fuss, Jason nodded, smiling in return. Sometimes, to really feel the holiday, you just have to leave everything as it is. Sometimes, silence and calm are exactly what you need to really appreciate the moment. His words hit deep. Yeah, the world was always full of noise, rush, and hustle. All those festive evenings and street lights might matter to many people, but for her it seemed like it was more important to just have this. A quiet evening with an unexpected guest who hadn't brought pressure or obligations into her life, but instead freed her from them. Time passed unnoticed. Their conversation slowly turned more personal. They talked about everything, from everyday worries to strange stories from their pasts. Jason told her about the time he accidentally set up a coworker and how the guy still teased him about it. Alexa shared a funny work story, how she struggled to learn a new software and finally figured out how to make the most of it. Laughter grew louder, and despite the late hour, neither of them felt tired. This wasn't just holiday downtime, it was something more, an actual connection that, to both of them, felt deeper than just a random encounter on New Year's Eve. But then, something broke the fragile moment. First, her phone rang, then another call came in. Alexa looked at the screen, surprised. It was her older sister, Lauren, someone she didn't talk to often. But, like with everyone during the holidays, it was one of those times you at least want to exchange greetings. "Hey, Lauren," Alexa said, answering the call and smiling at Jason, who was sitting across from her. "Hey, sis." Lauren's voice was cheerful and lively, which didn't surprise Alexa. Lauren was always the energy source in their family. "How's it going? How's New Year's?" Alexa felt a little embarrassed and glanced at Jason. He noticed her expression and smiled. "Everything's fine, Lauren. Really quiet. I'm here with a friend." Alexa barely suppressed a smile, but her voice gave away a hint of awkwardness. "With a friend?" Lauren sounded surprised. "I thought you'd be alone?" Alexa chuckled, feeling a blush creep onto her cheeks. "Well, things changed," she said, glancing at Jason with mild embarrassment. "But it's all good." Lauren, it seemed, couldn't help but ask for more details. "Who's this friend?" she asked, clearly intrigued. "Did you make a new acquaintance?" Alexa felt her stomach tighten with mixed emotions, and though she wasn't normally shy, something about the situation made her want to keep the details to herself. Everything happening now felt so personal and important that sharing it wasn't as easy as it would have been before. It was because she liked how this evening was turning out, and she didn't want anyone to interfere. "It's just a coincidence, Lauren. Anyway, don't worry, I'll be over soon. Yeah, I won't be here too long." She noticed Jason with a smile on his face looking at her like he was anticipating her thoughts. "Happy New Year. Hug everyone for me." "Happy New Year to you too," Lauren cheerfully said before hanging up without asking any more questions. Alexa looked back at Jason, and they both sat in silence for a moment before bursting into laughter. "I didn't expect to be asked about you," she said, blushing slightly. "So now you're my friend. This is funny." Jason kept laughing, but there was a mischievous glint in his eyes. "You know, I think I like this role. Let's keep it." Alexa laughed with him and felt her embarrassment melt away, replaced by a new sense of ease. The new year was bringing more surprises. At some point, she realized that every moment with him right now, on this night, in this moment, meant far more than she could have expected. Later that night, when they were getting ready to wrap up the evening, Jason suggested, "Maybe we should make this moment special? You did mention you don't drink champagne anymore." Alexa looked at him, smiling. "I'm in, but only if you stay as modest as you are right now." Jason's gaze shifted, becoming more serious, but the same playful spark still lingered in his eyes. "I'm up for it, and I'm good to stay here until morning." Her heart skipped a beat. In that moment, Alexa felt like a new twist had appeared in her life, something she couldn't have even dreamed of. The new year had fully arrived, and everything around seemed magical. The streets were filled with the sparkle of lights, and though the air was cold, it was somehow warmed by the sound of people's voices and laughter. Alexa and Jason were sitting in her cozy living room, continuing to enjoy the moment. The festive lights twinkled outside, and there was a light sense of magic in the air. The kind you only feel on New Year's Eve, when everything feels possible. Alexa couldn't believe how unusual the evening had turned out. Just a few hours ago, she was completely sure she'd spend the new year alone. And now she was sitting next to someone who, despite their recent random meeting, had somehow become very close to her. She couldn't explain it, but the more she talked to Jason, the more she felt that this evening, and maybe even the whole night, was much more significant than just a coincidence. At first, it had been a little awkward. She didn't know what to do with the feeling of sitting next to someone she barely knew, but who made her feel something extraordinary. But the longer they talked, the less tension there was, and the more smiles and lightness filled the air. Now, after a few hours, they were both fully engaged in conversation and laughter, enjoying the New Year's magic that had completely captured their hearts. "Did you ever think New Year's could be this unexpected?" Alexa asked with a smile. Jason, sitting across from her, propped his chin on his hand, smiled at her and replied, "Honestly, I never thought I'd be sitting in someone's living room, someone I barely know, celebrating New Year's. But right now, I like it. Maybe this is exactly how it was supposed to happen?" His words surprised Alexa a little. He spoke with such calm and confidence, like everything was exactly as it was meant to be. It was strange, but in a nice way. "You're not the only one," she said with a light smile. "I didn't expect to be sitting on this couch tonight, but I'm glad it turned out this way." Jason raised an eyebrow and leaned a little closer, as if studying her. "You can't say you're not happy," he said. "I can feel it." Alexa blushed. He was right. Yes, she was comfortable with him. Her heart wasn't racing like in those most exciting moments of life, but there was something special about the way he looked at her, about the way they talked, and how easy it felt to be with him. It was unfamiliar, but in the best way. "Maybe you're right," she answered, tilting her head. "But still, it feels like a surprise." Jason smiled and got up from the couch, stretching. His movements were natural, relaxed, like he'd been there for a while. "I'm gonna check out the kitchen," he said, glancing quickly at Alexa. "Maybe we should grab a bite or drink something else?" Alexa thought for a moment. She remembered how, at the beginning of the night, she'd thought she'd be alone, bored, just watching the clock tick toward midnight. But now, here she was, with Jason, and she realized the time had flown by without her even noticing. "I could bring some wine," she offered, getting up from her seat. "I've got a good one. Or maybe you want more champagne?" Jason laughed. "You've got me intrigued. The champagne was a great choice, but if you've got wine, I won't say no." Alexa went to the kitchen and quickly returned with a bottle of red wine, which she thought would be perfect for ending the celebration. They both poured themselves a glass and returned to the living room. "We can sit in silence for a bit," she said, setting her glass on the table and settling back into her chair. "It's fine. I don't mind." "I don't mind either," Jason replied, smiling. "It's a good idea. Sometimes the silence around us can be part of the celebration too. It's important just to be in the moment." Alexa felt the tension slip away, replaced by a feeling of lightness and calm. Sometimes you don't need much. Just being with someone who accepts you as you are, without any expectations. And in that moment, on that festive night, when nothing seemed to predict any surprises, she realized, it's these kinds of moments that make life special. They sat quietly for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. But eventually, Jason broke the silence. "So how do you usually celebrate New Year's?" he asked, raising his glass. "Are you always alone? Or do you have someone you spend the holidays with?" Alexa paused. Her life was calm and steady. She was used to celebrating the New Year with close friends, or, in recent years, alone. But this was the first time everything felt so different. "I usually celebrate with my sister or friends," she replied, thinking for a moment. "But the past few years, I've spent it alone, not because I want to, just how it turned out." Jason nodded silently and looked at her. It seemed like he understood something, but didn't say anything. Instead, he raised his glass and said, "To you and this evening. May it be the start of something new, no matter the circumstances or the plans." Alexa smiled, feeling how his words warmed her soul. She couldn't say this was just a coincidence, because deep down she felt that coincidences in life aren't that meaningful. Maybe she was ready for something to change, but didn't know what exactly. Maybe Jason was the person she could start this new chapter with. To us, she replied, and took a sip. At that moment, something shifted in the air. There was no magic, just two people sitting together, both knowing something was beginning to happen between them. Something good, something neither of them could have predicted. "Are you okay if I stay until morning?" Jason asked with a light smile. Alexa looked at him. Everything seemed like fate had led her here, to this moment. And though her heart sometimes wavered, she knew this was exactly the moment she had been searching for. "Stay," she said. "That's what New Year's is all about, giving us a chance to start with a clean slate." The hustle and bustle of the city streets in January had quieted down, leaving behind a sense of a peaceful, deep holiday. The snow that covered the parks and sidewalks created an illusion of magical silence, and the morning sunlight gently filtered through the windows, filling the room with a golden glow. Time passed, but as Aleska sat on her couch, she realized that this moment, this night, might have become the most significant event of her life. It wasn't what she expected, but that was the magic of it. Unexpected turns, random meetings, and now she felt like this randomness had become something bigger than just a moment that passes and is forgotten. Jason sat beside her, his voice, his laughter, everything they had shared together over those few hours now felt close to her, like something long familiar, something she had been searching for but couldn't find. A few days had passed since that evening, and now Aleska woke up with a feeling that something had changed in her life. She had met with Jason several times since then, first for coffee, then for a walk, and then for dinner. And each time, these meetings brought more joy and ease. She began to realize that the random evening wasn't just a magical moment, it was the beginning of a new path. Unexplainable, but true. Despite all her past doubts, Aleska understood that opening up to someone new wasn't just a chance for happiness, but a chance for real change. She had never thought the new year would bring not only festive cheer, but also an unexpected sense of mutual attraction. Now, sitting at her desk with a cup of coffee, she reflected on how far she and Jason had come in such a short time. Every time she thought she knew what would happen next, he managed to surprise her with new actions and gestures. It's like an old movie, she thought, an unexpected encounter, a random situation, and suddenly you're in the middle of your own romantic comedy. Aleska sighed, remembering the conversations they had with Jason. He turned out to be not only an interesting conversationalist, but also someone with a deep sense of humor who could easily lighten any tense atmosphere. When they met again a few days ago at one of the cozy cafes in the city, he suggested they take a walk through the park. Their conversation was once again light, effortless, but as always, filled with a special sincerity. It was the kind of sincerity she had been looking for but hadn't realized it before. With each day, her feelings became clearer. She understood that she had started to get used to his presence, to how he made her laugh and feel comfortable. "You know, Aleska," Jason said as they walked through the winter park, "I never thought New Year's could change so much in life." Aleska looked at him, raising an eyebrow in surprise. In his eyes, she noticed sincerity, and something that hadn't been as obvious during their early days of talking. It was something important, as if they both understood they were going through something significant. "I thought the same," she said, "but not because I believed in the magic of the holidays, but because I never thought I'd meet someone like this." Suddenly, Jason laughed, but there was something special in his laughter. Not just cheerful, but with an openness that only strengthened her belief that these moments weren't random. "Listen," he said, stopping and looking her in the eye. "I've thought about this a lot, and I want to say something to you, but only if you feel ready to hear it." Aleska felt her heart skip a beat. In that moment, she realized she no longer felt that tension she used to feel in her life when she was afraid to open her heart. With every conversation with Jason, that tension had melted away. "I'm ready to hear it," she said, feeling warmth spread through her chest. Jason took a deep breath before continuing. "I like how you laugh, how you think, how you feel the world. I like that you're not afraid to be yourself. I thought after that night we spent together I'd have to go back to my usual life, but I realized I want more. I want you." Aleska froze. His words sounded sincere, and her heart fluttered. She looked at him, trying to grasp what had just happened. But in that moment, everything became clear. And while she still couldn't explain exactly what had happened between them, she felt ready to say something important. "I want more too, Jason. I don't know how it happened, but I feel like this is the beginning of something important." Jason smiled, and for a moment it felt like the world around them had stopped. He took her hand and squeezed it tightly. "Then let's start this journey together," he said, his voice full of determination. Aleska felt something inside her change. She realized that this year had not only been a time of change for her, but also a time when she finally understood that everything that had happened was part of some bigger plan. Soon, they were in his car, driving her home. The windows were fogged up from the warmth inside, and even though the outside winter was cold, it was warm and cozy inside. When they pulled up to her house, Jason didn't immediately get out. He silently looked at her, and with a smile, he said, "We're starting something new, aren't we?" Aleska, a little surprised but also content, nodded. "Yes, Jason, we're starting something new." And so, under the streetlights, they both stepped into the future, uncertain of what awaited them, but feeling that this future would be much brighter and warmer than everything that came before. It was the beginning of their shared story.